Alright, I've decided for the next video I'm going to show you how to sort of refine some of the existing textures that we have, again. So the first one that I just really quickly want to go over, and I'll probably go over this again. I'm really a fan of doing a lot of texturing in Maya, mostly just because I hate manually making textures so much. So first thing, just really quick to touch on, is you can totally map other colors of things into a ramp. So in this case, if I could turn this green, I could just pick a color. I could map another ramp into this. I could map another noise texture into this. So what I'm going to do really quick is, so imagine maybe I don't want such a hard line, as like a hard division between these two areas. I want, like, I don't know, some dirt splashes on the mushroom or something weird. I'll go in, and to this currently blue color, I will map in a noise texture. And what that will do is basically is literally going to put a noise texture in my ramp. I'm very bad at setting these up in a way that's conducive to what I want, sure. Yeah, I guess let's try that, what the heck. So if we go back and look at our ramp, you'll actually see that that noise texture is showing up in the ramp. And just for the record, because we've done a planar map on this, this is going to look terrible on one side of the mushroom. It's going to look stretched and gross, which is the bad thing about doing that planar map. So if you really care about this, I would recommend, again, UVing the thing and just paint in, go into substance, just doodle black on the parts or whatever that you want to have a mask on, and do that instead of a ramp. But, for now, decent demo. And then we map this on the X. I'm going to actually look at the X side of this. You can kind of, sort of, see a little bit. I'm actually going to rotate the side degrees. It should pull up some of the sort of blackness in the base of that. It might be a little bit hard to see, but I was mostly just wanting you guys to be aware that you can map other things into ramps. So if we make that, a little bit whiter up here, you can kind of see pretty clearly like that is actually showing up. As a weird side tidbit, you can also map ramps into ramps, which sometimes I do if I've segmented my UVs aggressively. Sometimes I will go through and use basically ramp textures to just define different areas of my UVs. But if we look at this, now we have this awful, awful looking ramp of black to noise to yellow to blue. And if we wanted to take this other ramp texture and switch it so that the red actually shows up, we could set this to be a U ramp. We could do two things. We could set it to be a U ramp, which is what I'll do, or we could just, shift the red up so it actually shows up in the other one. But you can do some really just strange things with ramp textures if you go deep enough. So now we have, again, black to noise to this. And then if you really wanted to, you could take the noise texture and you could pipe it through a ramp and then use that to change the color of like what was, white on the noise texture would be purple, and what was black would be orange, and something in between would be teal or something. Like, you can get really weird mapping ramps and noises into each other. Highly recommend playing with it. It's very strange and powerful, and I'm actually really curious what that other random Lambert 2 looks like. Oh my. That's a fun mushroom. But yeah, so, this you can see a little bit better, like, where that noise texture is actually showing up and all that good stuff. But yeah, so that was sort of random segue. What I actually mostly wanted to go over, that is important though, you should totally use that for stuff, it's actually really handy. But what I mostly wanted to go over is, if we skip back to let's go back to the first mix node that we made, the purple and gold one, which was the mix corner scratch, I think. I think it was mix corner scratch. What am I doing? That's buttons. Wait. Alright, so we look at this. Oops. Stupid camera view. Alright. So, what we want on this, I'm actually just going to zoom in on the corner. What maybe we want on this is for the corner to be a little bit broken up. It feels a little bit maybe unnatural to have such a perfectly uniform scratched off edge. And what we can do to sort of fix that is kind of more nonsense with noise textures, honestly. So what I'm going to do is go find my mixed corner scratch. I'll just lay that out here and zoom in. Hopefully you guys can actually see what I'm doing. But basically, this is going to involve going through and organizing things, but we're going to use a noise texture and a multiply node to go through and sort of mess with this and basically cut some of this texture out. So what I'm going to do is just make my actually, you know what, I like that noise texture I had before. It was like kind of decent. So I'm going to grab that, and I'll just bring that in here. So we're going to use this, and we're going to put these into an AI multiply node. And this behaves effectively like a multiply node in Photoshop. So theoretically, if we grab the out color and we put that into input 2, and the out color of the noise and put that into input 1, and then again we need to actually hook this up into our mix. What this theoretically should do is go through based on this noise texture. Are you actually rendering? You are not. There we go. That's appealing. So we can look at our noise texture. In this case, I'm going to maybe make the nope, not frequency. Ratio. Oof. Okay, so what we actually want from this is the place 2D texture node on this. And if you go into the place 2D texture node, you can basically repeat this automatically on the U and the V. So I'm just going to make this like 10 and 10. I want this to be deliberately ugly looking. I just want it to show up in the actual texture. I mean, you can actually see the final result here, so it's more broken up, basically, than it was previously. So instead of having that, like, super hard line, we have the noise texture sort of chipping away at that. There's a cat just screaming sadly in the hallway. I think we have mice in our walls. Anyway, but basically what you're doing is you're taking this noise texture, which is effectively a white and black value, and this is going to work exactly like a multiply texture in what are you doing? Sorry, in Photoshop, where black is going to be crushed down to black, and white is pretty much going to stay the same. So what this is basically doing is saying, hey, here is our original curvature node. I just want to basically not show some parts of it. Anywhere that's black on the noise texture is just not going to show up on here. And this is where procedural texturing gets really, really powerful, in my opinion, is just the sheer ability to not have to do this in Photoshop. Like, you can do this kind of real time, and it's insanely convenient. So if we look at this, it looks a little bit nicer, maybe than it did previously. And if you want, you could, type the noise texture into an AI color correct, and you can mess with it further. You can put it into a ramp texture and mess with it further. Like, there's a lot of power to be had with doing this. The other convenient thing about this is whatever changes you make to this corner scratch is also going to apply to the scratches on the main body of your object, or of your texture. So if we look at the next texture we made, so we did the corner scratches, then we added the texture scratches to this. So that stuff that we did with the corner scratches is still going to show up on the texture scratch version. And if we wanted to, on that texture scratch version, we could also apply the same little noisy bits to that. So let's just say we wanted to do that. Again, kind of just mostly me showing you how to set stuff up twice if you want. Hey, we have the thing. So we have this multiply node, and I'm going to actually expand this so I can see what the heck is happening. And, alright, so we have our mixed scratches. So this is here. This is the one I'm going to be working with. Corner scratches. We have this AI multiply node here with our noise texture here. Okay, so scratches, and the mix for the scratches is this scratches JPEG. Okay, so what we're going to do is sort of pull this over here. We're going to grab another AI multiply node. Not multiply, that's not a word. AI multiply. And throw the scratches into input 2 and the noise into input 1. And for this, the input 1 is always going to be the thing that affects the lower one. It's basically like the higher layer in Photoshop. and grab the out color and just grab the R and throw that into the... Wait, what did I just hook up to this? This is... Oops, wrong one. Trying to hook it up to the wrong shader. Alright, so again, naming things is important, organizing is important. It's really confusing to manage all this stuff the first few times you do it. It gets better, I swear. So we put that into the AI Scratch, and theoretically, if we play this render, what it should do is... Ooh, that looks pretty weird. What it should have done is cut out the areas in Scratches. What it's actually done is just applied a very awkward looking noise texture to the whole surface of the object. So presumably I have hooked something up incorrectly, or something is working not the way I expect it to. And let's see here, what is happening? So sometimes if that happens, I'll go through and I'll try to, it's like, what happens if I switch the values? Like, I don't think that should do anything, but like, sometimes it does. And in this case, honestly, I'm not entirely sure why this is working. It might just be Maya glitching out on me. I do tend to encounter more issues when I try to do this multiply node with like a Scratches JPEG. It could actually have something to do with the fact that alpha's luminance is checked, which now I'm curious and I kind of want to see what happens if I uncheck it. It's still being creepy. Yes. So in this case, I mean, honestly, probably if you made a custom texture, the Scratches are fine the way they are, and you probably wouldn't need to do this. Well, I mean, you can invert your texture, and that just looks... Actually, that is irritating. I don't know why this worked, but it did. So it looks ridiculous right now, but if you look closely at this, what we have is a Scratch with some little areas occluded from it, which is exactly what we want. It's just the Scratches are purple and the rest of it's chrome. So in this case, I don't know again why that was working so terribly, but I'm just gonna kind of cheat a little bit, and I'm gonna just swap my textures. So texture shader 2 is now shader 1, and my filth, or my gold texture is now, oh goodness, my filth texture is now going to be shader 2. And then we should have nice occluded Scratches. So when in doubt, just play around with stuff, and eventually it will bend to your will. Yeah, so you can do that with pretty much any texture. If you wanted to use a ramp texture, if you wanted to use, a file texture to do that, you could. There's a bunch of different ways you could do that, and a bunch of different uses. Like, we could go through and do that for the dirt Scratch if we wanted to. I'm not really going to go through that. I feel like we've done it twice. That probably is enough. But again, sort of like different ways to sort of go through and like break up the edges and do a lot of honestly really powerful stuff with procedural texturing. And this is only using like 3 nodes. This is what it looks like if we actually throw that dirt texture on top of it. But yeah, that's pretty much that. I think that was most of the stuff that I wanted to go over, except for dust. I will show you that in a separate video. That is kind of the most complex thing, but I think if you guys are sort of solid on how this works, it shouldn't be that much of a stretch to get from this to the dust. It's a different node. There's like 1 or 2 things you just sort of have to be aware of while using it. And for grins, because I was gonna add, I'll break up the dust. If you guys want to hang around for that, I'll sort of narrate it. It's just going through the same thing again, just with the dirt. So if you guys are interested, hang around. If not, hop over to the next video. I'm going to make actually a new noise texture for this, partly just because I don't want them to all be included in the same spot, and partly just because I think this one's getting messy. So what I'm going to do is go to my dirt Scratch, expand that again. Oh, of course. So much stuff in my node editor. Alright, I'll pause the render. Alright, so where the heck is my... Alright, so we have the color correct, and that's being piped into my dirt. So I'm just going to grab this, make a new noise texture, and I have absolutely no idea what this is going to look like. I will go into the place to the texture of this, which is just, to me, just easier to get to here, and I'm just going to kind of use whatever weird default thing the noise texture is. And then again, just do the AI multiply, which for some reason to me is really fun to say. And I'm just going to grab the color correct and throw it into input 2, and the noise, and throw it into input 1, and then grab either the R, G, or B, and put that into my dirt. Theoretically, this should do something to break up the dirt, and in this case I think it's also sort of working in the opposite way I expected again. So what I'm going to try here is, for grins, I'll try in... Oof, that's not what I wanted. I was like, what if we invert the color like we did last time? That worked well. Okay, so in this case, I would like to actually see what this multiply is doing, and just to make sure, what am I actually mapping this into? This is my curvature node. Oh, right. Okay, so I found, here's the problem. It's a dumb problem. So when we set up the dirt, we were using the curvature green value for that. So I was using red because I forgot that I did that. So in this case, theoretically, if I switch my outcolor R and use outcolor G instead, put that into my mix, theoretically it should work better. And I've also gone through and inverted some things that I shouldn't have inverted. Oh, cool, that actually worked pretty decently. So what we have now, if my computer deigns to render this image, is a sort of lightly broken up, it's really subtle, honestly, but is a lightly broken up version of this dirt texture. Theoretically lightly broken up. What have I done to this noise texture? This frequency ratio. Okay. Great. And cool. Let's actually try a thing. Let's actually just push that down like a lot. So this should get rid of a lot of the dirt if we look at this. So if we grab the multiply node, okay. I think I did some really aggressive stuff with the color correct, and that's probably affecting this a bit. So what if I like turn down the exposure, maybe, or something? Okay, that does help a little bit. So sometimes when you mess with, do really aggressive color corrects, it kind of affects things. Like the changes roll through here, and sometimes it can be it can be annoying to like troubleshoot where something's happening. But you see here, if we isolate the multiply, that we have a lovely occluded green here. So if we look at the mix shader itself, you can see it's cut back pretty aggressively on the amount of dirt, and it's also kind of made the placement of dirt, I don't know if I'd say more natural per se, but less sort of solid and uniform feeling. So in this case, then you can go back in and play, like, okay, I know it's working, I'll play with the exposure and see if that, I do kind of like the dirtier effect, personally. But this will give you, if you, again, play with it a little more, refine it a little bit more, but it'll give you some areas where there's like bits and bobs cut out of your mesh, or of your texture. You could also theoretically go in and map something into the exposure, so that you have a little bit more control of that. Maybe it's more exposed in some areas, less exposed in others. That will also give you more control over this particular texture. But this is basically what we have now for this texture. Next video, I mentioned dust like 80 times. We're going to do the dust. And I think that'll actually be more or less it for procedural texturing. So, onwards!